cloud. There
Thank
you go.
you. Thank you. And then the second thing is, let's not try to get all the exact wording and the 50 words and everything. Let's at least try to get everybody's feedback on all the ideas. We'll try to do the refining later, or if you can give us better, definition after the meeting, that's great too. But at least let's talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And frankly, I don't think you should have to rewrite it in order to submit information. I think that however the grouping is done at the DPO, I mean, we have study groups for ours, but however that grouping is done at the DPO level for their platform, I think that they ought to take the suggestions and they ought to rework it. That's not really, to include those things if they possibly can. And so I don't see anybody else wanting to speak to Article 1. Roy.
I wanted to know if it would be possible to add a plank on housing construction. If not,
I would suggest that you can send that in as and there is, if you have Rose's email, there is a place to send in edits and to send in LAIs. So you might want to look at that, right?
I don't really have Rose's email at the moment.
Well, if you go to the DPO, I believe that those links are all on the DPO website. I did not check that out, but it looked like it was something from the website. Michael.
Yeah, we can absolutely consider a new plank, and this would be the best time to do it is before July 25th. So, Roy, can you give us a 10,000-foot view of what you're thinking?
Oh, basically, we want the party to commit to getting more housing constructed in particular Multnomah County to reduce overall rent costs and reduced homelessness within Multnomah County.
And you want that under this one, or do you want that one under human rights?
Whichever it would be more sensible to put under. If it would be better to put it under human rights, that would work fine as well.
I don't see a reason not to put it under this one. And by the way, the committee may very well decide to move it to a completely different article.
Right.
But I think submitting it to this one is appropriate.
And if you have some verbiage that you want to send, Gary has put his email in here and as said, send him your draft and he will get it to the DPO platform committee since he's on that committee. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Karen.
All right, let us move on to education. Anybody who has any input on education? Mary, you need to learn to raise your virtual hand. Dan.
I'm a little concerned, excuse me, about plank 5.
On education?
Yes.
Plank 5.
Where, change windows here, where they talk about, we oppose public funding for parochial or charter schools managed by for-profit corporations.
Right.
All well and good. I personally don't care if they're for-profit or not. Do we really want to be funding charter schools?
Or parochial schools?
Or yeah, parochial is just a non-issue. That's a full stop right there. But as far as I'm concerned, and maybe I'm missing something here. That,
you are.
okay.
I can speak to that because there are
Okay.
charter schools that are under school districts and are
Okay.
part of the public school system. So that may be why it has the term in here for-profit corporations, because if they're under, if
Okay.
a charter school is under a school district, then it is not for-profit.
Okay. Are they held to the same standards that other public schools are?
Yes, if it's a charter school that
Okay.
is commissioned
Okay.
under a school district, yes, same standards. Yes.
Okay.
Does that help
I guess
you?
I'm unclear. Well, I guess I'm unclear about what makes them a charter school at that point, but okay, fine, I'll deal with it. Yeah,
All right.
So,
Michael.
You know what? I forgot to put my hand down. Although I would also mention that we discussed this in committee, and the reason why we struck public is because we had a discussion with people who are from rural counties, and they made it pretty clear that there are counties where those public charter schools or not-for-profit charter schools are the only way that county can achieve its educational goals. And it becomes a matter of capacity. If we don't support the charter schools, then those counties simply won't have the capacity to educate all the kids that they need to.
Okay.
That's why I ended up striking it, I think.
Okay, yeah, and again, as long as they're held to the same standards as other public schools, for example, can't make their numbers look better by getting rid of problem students and such, I'm okay with it.
All right. Mary, this is the order I've got. Mary, Tony, and Roy. Mary.
Yes, I went through this and I'm really impressed. It hits all of the current problems in education. The only problem I had was the first one, fully fund education. Okay, everybody wants that. However, I know in the MODEM platform, we say in accordance with the quality education model. I think that should be added if you're going to include that fully fund education. There are 19 planks. Did you say 15?
No, I said that they were supposed to try for a 9, but they obviously didn't do that, but that's been explained. So,
Yeah.
It'll end up being what it ends up being, I suppose. Maybe that's just a goal. I don't know anything more about it.
I think they did a really fabulous job.
And if you think that language ought to be in there, send that to Gary or Michael as well, or you can send it into the DPO. There's
Okay.
as a comment to put that in number 1.
Okay.
Tony.
Yeah, my granddaughter has gone to a charter school, and I know pretty familiar with charter schools. They're good. They sometimes work with alternative students, of course, and the standards are not always. It's not always the same, and in terms of grading systems and testing, they could be different. I'm not certain about that, but I know of some charter schools that have been. But to me, a public charter school is fine, and I think that's a great inclusion. It's when you get into private, as we all know, the private schools and this choice and the homeschooling and all that's used for religious purposes. That's obviously out, and it's in the platform. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
You're welcome, Tony. Roy.
Just a suggestion, but it might be a good idea to have like language affirming the support for public charter schools as well. Maybe that's probably implied with the lack of support for the other kinds of charter schools. But yeah, sorry.
All right. Now remember, if you have an idea, either send it to Michael or Gary, or put it in yourself. I am not keeping track of all those things. I mean, I'm noting them on my handy dandy pieces of paper that I printed out, all 25 pages of it, but I am not responsible for submitting your suggestions, just so you know. Roy, did you have more, or did you just forget to take down your hand?
Just
Okay.
forgot to take that.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any more hands on education, so let's move to environment. I'm not seeing anything. No hands here. I will say, I thought they did a pretty good job on environment myself. And it's under 9 planks. See nobody. All right. I know we have some on the next one. Article 4, Foreign Policy and National Security. Roy?
This is one relating to the environment.
Oh,
as
environment. You're back
specifically-
on environment. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, specifically for Multnomah County. Yeah, this might be like too specific, but. Oh, and then this is the Democratic Party of Oregon, and this would be like a Multnomah County specific thing. But here in Multnomah County, we have the Portland International Raceway. One problem that they've had there is that the cars racing there have been using leaded gas, and what they've seen from that is that from the leaded gas that's been sold by the city of Portland to racers, just going off that, they expect like a reduction in test scores of like 6% within like, I think it's 1 to 2 miles or so, and effects around 40 miles or so. If that's too not a good issue for the Party of Oregon to deal with, just don't include it, but just figured I should mention it.
Thank you. Foreign Policy, Nancy. Unmute yourself, Nancy. There you go.
I keep trying to send a document, but I'm obviously not up on how to send a file. I did send a copy to Michael's rule email, Gary's email, if they know how to paste the document onto the chat. Yes, I endorsed the last comment about the North Portland issue because the air is crappier out here because we're running all these cars at PIR. We can hear them and we can see them in our localized air quality monitors. So it's a problem and it's bad for the children in Kenton. So I totally support what he's saying. I think it's a big enough issue. It's been overlooked for too long. Yes, I worked on foreign policy with my good friend, Sally, who is got so much energy, it blows me away. And we were concerned that the DPO platform seemed too militaristic. It also seemed different from the other platforms I could find.
Too militaristic? Is that what you said?
Too militaristic. Like in the introduction, it says twice that there should be a reference to strong military. Well, of course, our country spends more than all these other countries put together. And the progressive Democrats have been fighting for reductions in military spending. And it's in the Washington County document, it's in our document, it's in the California document, and it's in the Lane County document that we need to reduce military costs. And we put that on our submission. One of the other things we submitted, I can see it's already in the revised draft. We put something related to our concern about sanctions with humanitarian impact. That's language borrowed from an old Multnomah County document, and that's now in there. We also had 2 items related to the Middle East, related to Israel, Palestine, and Yemen. And they sort of combined it all into the Middle East, but they kept the spirit of what we said on the revision. It really needs something to be there about cost and the budget, because we all know, or at least our county document knows, that we can't meet our domestic needs if we spend this kind of money. There was a 4th thing, and maybe Sally will remember, but a couple of things I thought of afterwards. I was very disturbed that I forgot to put in something about cluster bombs, because all of the peace organized organizations that I get emails from are opposed to this transfer of cluster bombs and this escalation of our proxy war with Russia and the destruction of Ukraine and etc. And so we did put something about negotiation in there. I particularly was distressed when the dam broke, the huge dam broke. And I'm also very distressed by the fact that the shipments of grain are going to be impacted. So I would love to see something about negotiation related to the Ukraine-Russia. What am I forgetting, Sally? Help me.
I thought I saw something about bombs in here.
Sally put in an edit on the nuclear disarmament.
Oh, well, okay. That's not what I thought I saw, but that's okay. Michael and then Roy.
All right, so to Nancy's point, we did discuss cluster munitions, and I think there's an LAI in the works.
Oh. That may be where I saw it, under the LAIs.
Yeah, but to that point, I think it might be wise to have a plank also that addresses cluster munitions not as weapons of mass destruction, because as ugly as cluster munitions are, they are not weapons of mass destruction as commonly defined, because they're not material, they're not biological or chemical or nuclear weapons, but they are weapons with that leave behind. I guess a good way of putting that is unintended hazards for civilian populations, because the failure rate on these cluster bombs, I mean, the most optimistic that I've seen is 2.5% of cluster bombs will fail to detonate, and they'll sit there in the middle of a field as a dud for some poor civilian to come along and blow them up. And so it might be appropriate to have an LA dealing with that also talks about landmines, because that's another thing that the United States doesn't, we haven't signed on to that treaty either. But that's another thing where there's all these landmines in the world that are waiting to blow up civilians, and the cost of civilians demining fields that used to be farmland is out of control. There are entire charities devoted just to demining former war zones. So I think that would be appropriate as a plank also, to combine those two.
Okay.
So I will tell you that a number of the things that you brought up, Nancy, are under the LAIs for Article 4, the stuff on Yemen, the stuff on cluster munitions, and a more general one about production and transfer of anti-personnel mines, etc., and their destruction. There are currently 6 suggested LAIs. I don't know why we need both 4 and 5. I think you could put those together, but maybe that's the way things are. But right now, I see them, those issues under the LAIs.
So
Okay.
you're saying there doesn't need to be more wording on cluster bombs or landmines, to your sense of it?
I don't know about that. Michael seems to think that you can, that you could add a plank on those. And so if you wanted to send him language on that, I think he would listen to that and take it forward. I'm just letting you know that a number of the issues that you brought up are listed under the LAIs, just so that you know that they are being covered. Sally.
We did come up with a couple of other planks, this group of people that worked on making some edits. And one was, and I don't see that it's included anywhere, but maybe I didn't read carefully enough, that we wanted to oppose our bloated military budget, not necessary for safety and undermining our ability to meet domestic needs while benefiting military contractors. I don't see that that was incorporated. And a second one that I don't think was considered because it was too long, but we didn't know it was too long, was about wanting our country to support diplomatic, we focused it on Ukraine-Russia conflict, and yeah, it could have been in a more general way, because that maybe would be an LAI if you're getting that specific. But I would like to have said that, we believe our country should work for this diplomacy and being a mediator in the world rather than jumping into other people's conflicts. And we could write it better and be way under 50 words if we had known that.
All right.
So I'm gonna work on rewriting that and also resubmitting the one about the military budget.
Thank you. Roy and then David, and I'm assuming, Michael, you just left your hand up. Otherwise, I'll call on you after Roy and David. Roy.
This is related to the Ukraine thing. From my understanding, Putin's stated goals with the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that the Ukrainians are not a legitimate people and should be erased.
That's
I think it'd be very difficult to find a diplomatic solution given that reality.
Yeah, that sounds like Putin, all right. David. Oh, David took his hand down.
No, great, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to hopefully hear any more of the language that was removed about Palestine. I think if we can't take a stand on the Palestinians having a free country of their own, then we have no moral authority to take any stand on any other foreign policy conflicts. It should be something as simple as Palestine should have its own free sovereign country, unilaterally recognized if we have to. I think that last plank about the Middle East is just a, nonsensical and like green lights, whatever, everything that's been going on already. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have some language that you would like to send David either directly to them or to Michael or Gary, that would be great. Nancy.
Yeah, I think my computer was buffering when I last tried to do something. There's good language about the Israel-Palestine issue on the Washington County platform. Pretty much language that people could agree on. There is also good language about Israel, Palestine, and Yemen, which I also think is a big issue on the California one. I think they are big issues that we've just let molder for a long time. So it would be nice.
I don't think it's against the rules to resubmit things that still haven't gotten in. And this would be the last time you can resubmit them until you go to the platform convention. So I would suggest that even if it didn't get in the first time, that you try again. Be the squeaky wheel, and it might happen. I'm big on being squeaky wheel. And some people know that I do squeaky wheel really well. Some of our legislators know it better than others. So, okay, healthcare and public health. Here we go. You resubmit it just by sending it in, Nancy. You can resubmit it. Just send it in again to the. I don't know whether it's really true because it says it updates it, every 5 minutes, but we'll see. I can't believe that someone's actually sitting there making those changes that quickly. I can't believe they're not going through a committee. So that's my thing on that. But I think you do that, or you send it along to Gary or Michael, who are sitting on this call. And I think They are both good advocates and are really good at representing Multnomah County wishes. And so I think, and I don't think it would hurt to do both. Send it into them and let Gary and Michael make a case. That's another thing I do really well. Let's hit them from more than one side. So healthcare and public health. Anyone on healthcare? I actually thought they did a pretty good job on this, by the way. It's got a lot of planks, but I think some of it is. Anybody on public health? Boy, Marty, I thought you would jump in on this one. All right. Michael.
So I just want to say, I chaired this committee, and it was a Herculean effort. But we managed to, on our first draft, we managed to eliminate 2 planks and still incorporate language that wasn't there before about protection for reproductive autonomy, protection for LGBTQIA rights, particularly transgender healthcare. I would gladly do it again, but it was an awful lot of work. And I think that speaks to just how big this particular article is. And again, the case that maybe we need to cut this article into 2 pieces and divide up some of the duties between 2 different articles.
That could be, I think it would be even more difficult, however, to decide, okay, which ones are we putting under public health and which ones are we putting under healthcare? You know, they're so intertwined that I think it would still be difficult, Michael. I'm sorry. It's a huge issue. So Sally, Marty, and Dan in that order. Sally.
I may not have read carefully enough, but I might want to including people, incarcerated people, because I'm not sure they're getting the health care that they deserve. And just maybe there's one of the planks where it could just say including people in prison.
That's a really good point, Sally. Kindly email that to me.
Although if it's a human right, even people in prison are humans and have the human right, right?
But specifically healthcare, because I have heard from not anybody I know, but from other people that their loved ones were not receiving health care that they should be getting.
Point taken. Marty.
Well, Bobby, you called me out by name, so I feel that I have to say something. But what I have to say is this. I think our platform is way, way, way too long. I've said it before. I've said it on other places in other venues, but I'm saying it here again. Nobody among the people that we want to get voting Democratic, who are not already committed Democratic voters, is going to read this document. No one. I can't bear to read it, and I'm a committed Democrat voter. It has to be shortened. We have to figure out what is most important and most salient and put those in our platform and find a way to have some perhaps addendum or secondary document that makes all of us happy that our viewpoint has been put forward, because what we're looking at right now is all of the people who care about it make damn well sure to put something in the way of a plank, but they're never going to get out and they're never going to get read by the people we need desperately to convince to vote Democratic. Thank you for letting me vent.
Dan, Gary, and then Tony.
Okay, 2 points. To address what just came up, honestly, I don't think this is really meant as a document for people to sit down and read through all in one sitting. This is a basic overall statement, a large statement of values. And what might be a good idea would be for us to also at some point write a much shorter 1 or 2 paragraph statement of values. The other point, I just want to geek out for a moment and make the observation for the record that Mike thought to use the Greek Heraclean instead of the Roman Herculean. I love my tribe. I really do.
Gary, unmute Gary.
Marty, I really appreciate your comments, and I have said them in other venues as well. And they actually go in spades when applied to the Multidems platform, which is even longer and more particular. In reality, it's an impossibility to hope for this platform, this version of the platform, but it is an appropriate question to be considered for a future platform. And I would hope that we would somehow figure out how to speak in layers, if you want to call it that, so that we have something that we present to voters that's, you know, short and pithy. I don't know what the term is, and the next level down and the next level down from that, you know, but and just to admit it in the platform itself, to say it's a multi-phased document, so read it the best way you can for you.
Tony.
Yeah, I had problems getting through it. And, you know, I consider myself a decent reader. I read a lot of professional materials and written them. So I have a few suggestions. One is that sometime soon, after this document is approved, because it's too late to go back and start cutting or looking at things that have to be analyzed. There's been a lot of good work done on that. But I think there needs to be a shortened version. I think if we can develop a shortened version after this is adopted, it would help the general public. And I think I've said this at meetings as well. No, nobody that I know, nobody that I know is going to look at this document and read through it. Even some good Democrats aren't going to do that. Even some PCPs are not going to do that. So I think the first step is to develop a shortened version. Perhaps by developing a shortened version, once this is accepted and absorbed for a couple of months, just start to work, post that version on our website, make it available to PCPs to copy and use. And if we shorten this for public, and it's not just public consumption, it's everybody's consumption, then we can look at the shortened version and figure ways to expand on something that's very short, make it longer, more detailed, but maybe it doesn't end up like this in 2 years. And I do notice there are repetitive phrases. And like I said, I've written this stuff, I've written it for students. There's a lot of repetition of ideas, and it's kind of preachy at people, and it's not necessary to, say it. One of the things, I think if you believe in something and you write it down, you don't need to keep saying we believe in it, because you've written it down. And you can say we believe strongly and put a few things, and then the next article, we believe strongly. There are little things you can do to make it more readable. And then there are bigger things you can do to make it more comprehensible. And I think my recommendation is start it after this is done, accepted, understood, get a group of people together who want to draw up something for the average person. And then by the time we get that out, step back and look at what we've done. And then we'll be able to plan for the next one and improve upon it. And I say improve upon it because there is good work here. So it's only a matter, from my mind, of refining. That's it. Thank you.
And I would suggest that for public consumption, all public consumption, that we look to make sure that we have good preambles and that we use those, because those are the general statement of everything underneath it. And if you want to read something that is incomprehensible, try the national platform. That, and it is talk about being overly wordy and repetitious. I would just point that out.
I've done it. I see it.
Nancy and then Mary.
Yeah, I think that we have a confusion here between communications and platform. I see the platform as mainly for precinct persons and people who are going to get out the vote and do the grassroots work. And, you know, with the foreign policy statement as it currently reads, it makes me think I should go to the Democratic Socialists of America. If it was amended, I would feel comfortable being with the Democratic Party of Oregon. And so I think it's more for precinct people. I see other really long platforms out there. And I think that the communication coming from our leadership, I've seen it vary a great deal over the years. And, you know, I think some of the comments to me seem like a confusion between communication and how well we're doing that and the platform, because I think our situation is complex enough to merit a longish platform.
Mary.
Okay, just a minute. Okay, concerning the national one, I'm talking about education. My understanding was that the Bernie people negotiated to write it. And I could speak of the education part is they wrote it as like in an essay. And I mean, it's a beautiful document. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes because it's how things should be. And it's beautifully put. I recommend everyone check it out. It's still, for another year, it's still in force. They're going to craft a new one soon, like we're doing.
All right. I'm not seeing anybody with any raised hands talking about healthcare and public health. So I am going to move us on to human rights. Article 6. Anybody wishing to speak to any of the planks under human rights? Sally. You're muted, Sally.
Okay. At first I was disappointed there was no article on criminal justice, but the human rights article contains lots of very good stuff on human rights. So I guess it's okay to call it human rights, even though it's specifically has another name. So I did submit in number 5, I submitted the 3 words, including incarcerated individuals, that got incorporated. And in 9, I added the last sentence about mandatory sentencing and related it to what they had already said about restorative justice and rehabilitation and how mandatory sentencing makes that less possible to do. But I also had hoped to include one other thing, but they didn't include it in number 7, talking about transgender and non-binary people. I really wanted to say, including protections for people in prison, but they didn't include it. Now, maybe it didn't quite fit there. But in our Multnomah platform, I worked with someone to put in something about protecting transgender people in prison, because we don't want people put in this section of the prison that they don't really belong in, and where they will maybe be treated wrongly or feel very uncomfortable. So I don't know why it wasn't accepted to add it in there, but maybe it needs to be a separate thing. I don't know. I think it's important.
I'm just doing a quick scan here to see if they might have put something about it under the LAIs, and I have not finished that because they have quite a few LAIs under this one, and I've only made it through about half of them so far.
What the sentence I tried to put in was gender identity must be respected everywhere, including in the prison system. I made it, general.
Okay.
But maybe it made too many words because I was unaware, as I've said a few times, that there was a 50-word limit. I'm checking to see if it made too many words. It made 61 words, so I hope it wasn't just rejected for that reason, because it could have been said in a shorter way.
Well, send it to Gary and Michael and try rewriting it again. You got till the 25th.
Yeah.
So you might want to do that. Michael.
So I would repeat the statement that Sally should send that to me and Gary. That I'm just going to comment that it might be the case that we laid it aside so that some of us could reword it later. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I don't know that for sure. But
Yes.
that is a possibility with some of these longer planks, that we just laid them aside to reword them, and that we'll reconsider them the next time we meet, which is going to be July 28th and 29th.
And did you say that the 50 words is hard and fast?
The 50 words is hard and fast.
Okay.
It's a bylaw, and we can't work our way around a bylaw.
All right. Anybody else have anything on human rights? I'm not seeing anymore. All right. Infrastructure. I know there's some infrastructure people here. I'm not seeing any hands for infrastructure. Okay. It looked pretty good, but who knows? Article 8, protecting democracy. David, then Gary. David.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry, I wonder if anybody had discussed a plank stating that the United States should not have territories, that all US citizens should have votes for senators and presidents, and we shouldn't have any US citizens who don't have those full democratic rights.
Michael, Gary, your hand is up anyway, so I'll let you speak first, and then Michael, if you want to chime in, feel free. Gary. You're muted, Gary.
I'm just going to talk about my one issue. So Michael wants to talk.
Go ahead, talk about your issue if it's under this.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to talk about the campaign finance reform plank. The election integrity study group came up with a version last month, I guess, no, actually this month, about a week ago, where we reflect very closely to the current MultDems platform plank and LAIs, although not quite as specific as that. And basically, we say we believe money is not speech and that people, not money, should determine election outcomes. We therefore demand substantive campaign finance reform, including small donor and public financing, comprehensive, transparent disclosures, and strong contributions and expenditures limits. And that's all very consistent with what Multnomah County has been saying for the last 2 or 3 years. The version that DPO approved in its last go round is we believe money is not speech and support campaign finance reform, including small donor and public financing, accurate disclosures, and total dollar raised limits. People, not money, should determine election outcomes. And for the life of me, I've been involved in campaign finance reform pretty heavily for the last 3 years. I have never heard the term total dollar raised limits as being an important concept. And it feels, frankly, like that last part is diluting what we've been talking about for the last 3 years. I'd like to have, I want to understand it better. Michael, maybe you can represent it better, but I feel like we're going backwards here.
Nancy? Nancy, you're muted.
One of the pieces I just looked for, and it's not there, and considering what happened with Shemaya Fagan, perhaps, but more especially from the representative who quit from Troutdale or someplace like that, we don't pay our legislators enough. And so some of the people who could be in the State House can't be because they can't figure out a way to afford it. And that blocks full participation. So I don't know if it would fit in here, but it might be something to include, that those people should be paid decent wages, since we expect a lot of them.
So you're talking about putting that in this column. I'm also wondering if, since we have an economy and labor one, I don't want to be redundant, but I don't know if it's addressed there either, to be honest, because it is a wage issue, and if we say everybody should receive a livable wage, then, I guess our legislators need that as well. Michael, and then Tony.
Okay, so far I've heard wages for legislators, I've heard campaign finance limits, and I've heard territories. So David, to your question, I don't recall that we actually had a plank about territories, and I think that's a good one. That so-called territories should have congressional representation. That might also include the District of Columbia, by the way. So I'd suggest submitting it as at least an LAI, but also possibly as a plank. And I'll conclude my remarks by talking about the difference between an LAI and a plank as far as how you format it. So let's go to campaign finance. I remember there was a pretty thorny discussion about that in committee. I frankly don't understand the topic well enough to know the ins and outs of that one. I do think submitting feedback and wording it specifically to say that this discussion about total dollar amounts is confusing and that a voter isn't going to understand what it means, I think that's good feedback to give us. And I think that that's something probably that we should strip from that plank, because as other people have pointed out, these planks might be at a collegiate reading level, and we really need to put these at a 7th grade reading level, just so that people don't get tired halfway through the document. So then, as far as the points of raising wages for legislators, I think that would probably be best stated as a legislative action item, as an LAI. And so I would recommend Nancy or somebody else submit that as an LAI. So then real quick, I'm going to get into the difference between how you word a plank and how you word an LAI. Now this is important, folks, because how you word something or the language that it contains could mean that we vote it in as a plank, we vote it in as an LAI, or we vote it down altogether. A plank is a statement of values or a statement of principles. And our rules are that it has to start with the words "we believe" or "we support" or we oppose. And it's something that's kind of 10,000-foot view. So an example of a plank would be, we believe that paying our legislators a living wage is better, is conductive towards a healthy democracy. And then an LAI does not have to include those words, we believe, or we support, or we oppose. It can just state an action. And the LAI could be as simple as pay legislators a living wage that allows them to commute to Salem and back. That could be an LAI. And you'll notice, it's very direct. It's using imperative language. It's not using descriptive language. It's using imperative language. And that then becomes a very simple LAI that I think could make it into the platform for this article. Okay, that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you very much. Good words. Tony?
Yeah, I think the idea about every citizen, all the people in our territories, NDC voting, that will affect everybody, including people in Oregon. So I think that's a great thing. And I don't know, if you'd be kind enough to put my name on that along with you, I'm supportive of that. It's great. Second quick thing, and Mike brought this up. Yes, the reading level here is possibly too high for the average person to read, whether they're a PCP or not. And at some point, maybe the next time round, and there are, reading level checks in typing programs. I think that's a real interesting idea to ponder for the future, to get more readable language. Maybe that's what I was trying to get at. But Michael brought up a good idea for the future. Thank you.
I will tell you that it is hard to keep to 50 words if you lower it to a 7th grade reading level. As somebody who taught language arts, you have to use smaller words and more of them.
Well, you have to work on it, right?
I know, I'm just saying that sometimes that may be part of the reason it's at the level it's at right now, is trying to use the most. As a language arts teacher, I was always telling them, use the most precise word that you can use. And so sometimes that's what you do. Roy?
So I actually kind of started working a bit on simplifying a few of the things. Should I just send that? Would it be okay if I sent that to like Mike or Gary, or should I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please don't send it on the 25th, though. Please send it several days before the 25th.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have a lot on our
Any of you who are sending things in, I mean, we're lucky that we're doing this towards the beginning of this cycle. I mean, even though it's, the final date is now 8 days away. But the sooner you get those in, the easier it is for the groups that are dealing with them. And the more likelihood that they'll be able to incorporate them. If you wait till the very end, then it's going to be more difficult. All right. Anybody else on, what were we on? On protecting democracy. Roy, did you have more?
Right now I'm good. Right now I'm just working on that.
I'm gonna lower your hand then. Okay. See nobody else. We are now at the final article, science and technology. And then we can look at LAIs because we have time. Michael.
So this was another one where a lot of work went into it. There was a huge discussion about whether or not to support artificial intelligence. The there were two competing suggestions, one to say we support, one to say we oppose. We ended up landing on, we believe that it needs to be pursued under strict regulatory conditions. And this speaks to the fact that a lot of people right now are scared out of their wits about what AI is doing. There's also a little thing in there about cryptocurrency. My sense is that there's going to be an LAI that addresses both cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence at the same time, talking about strict ethics, talking about limiting carbon output. Something that's not mentioned in the planks is electronic waste. Which also needs to be limited. But right now I'm working on that with Spencer and a couple other people. So there's, despite this being a short and maybe to a lot of people pretty boring article, there's a lot of work going on this one right now.
All right, anybody else wishing to speak to science and technology? I'm glad you're dealing with AI amongst other things. Sally.
I just wondered about the issue of how much money gets spent for space exploration. Of course, scientifically, that's very exciting, but I don't know the answer to that. But I often, when something's going on, think, oh, how much money was spent on that instead of fixing stuff on Earth that needs help. But some science person, I wish, would answer if there are any of you here.
Dan and then Michael.
Science research fixes life on Earth. To give a very blunt example, what we need to be able to colonize Mars is exactly what we need to know to be able to fix what's going on in the environment on Earth. So it tells us what we need to do in other areas. This is why we do pure research. So we come up with products, we come up with scientific ideas, we come up with ways to fix things. It wasn't originally what we were formally looking for, but it works, so who cares?
Michael.
Yeah, so as far as space research goes, I kind of disagree with Sally here that space research for years and years and years and years and years has been kind of underfunded. Now, this has had good and bad effects. It means we've had to scrap missions that we've really wanted to do things like look at the compositions of certain comets and asteroids that give us really important answers to how did life happen, which also gives us important answers to could there be life out there. But I think Dan really has a good point here, and it's been raised by I think kind of by Sally too. You know, there's all these people talking about why don't we terraform Mars? Well, the first step to terraforming Mars is developing the technology to fix Earth. We don't think about some of this basic research that doesn't look like it yields important results immediately as being important, but we have to take a long view of basic research. Special relativity and general relativity had no practical applications back in the 1920s. Quantum mechanics had no practical applications back in the 1920s. And more recently, mRNA technology had no practical applications when it was first developed in the 1990s. Well, these days, we have entire industries built around the implications of quantum mechanics. We have entire industries, billions of dollars of industries built around the implications of special and general relativity. And we have billion-dollar industries built around the implications of mRNA technology. And that's just 3 examples. You know, we can talk about what's better spent elsewhere, but what the benefit of the money that you spend on this kind of basic research, both space research and other kinds of research, is very difficult to predict until you're a century or 2 down the road. And we need to be cognizant of that. And that's why I think, quite frankly, we could stand as a species to spend more on this sort of scientific research.
Gary,
Yeah, I don't pretend to be any advanced scientist. I do claim to care a lot about research, which I think has informed us in many ways through this past, century or previous centuries. And I don't know what our limits are and what our new discoveries could be. All I know is that we keep on finding them, and in many ways fixing a lot of problems and advancing our civilizations in many ways that people, 10 years ago, hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, would never have comprehended if they had only put limitations on the investment of what we do in terms of fixing the current problems. So I really applaud what Michael has said. We just need to also, we have to do both, and but we cannot forsake the development of our future, because we actually get some really good stuff when we do that. We've all benefited by that immensely, and our children and their children will benefit the same way if we don't muck it all up. Now, my biggest concern is not that. It is how we make all of our investments in the name of profit. And that, and the disparity of the unequal treatment of people is something that I think Democrats could really stand up a lot better against and for in the right ways. We've got to get rid of this advancement for the sake of making people rich. That's totally stupid. Let's get on with making all of ourselves better, and we all benefit from that. And Democrats will win on that. And we don't have to have anything fancy about campaign finance reform and about how we allow winners to dominate campaign finance. If we make all people equal as electors and say that the purpose of government and all of what we do is to advance the benefit of everyone, I think we have a winner.
thank you. Marty, and then Dan.
Oh. Well, all right, you called for me. I am a scientist. I am a PhD biologist. I have done basic research. And I would just point out that over and over again, it has been shown that curiosity-driven basic research ultimately ends up in enormous practical values. But frankly, I don't care whether the research I do have done over the years ends up with practical values or making money or establishing companies or industries. What I care is it expands our knowledge of the universe, and that alone is beneficial for us. So thank you.
Dan,
Okay, two little things. I'm sure Marty has heard this expression before, being a scientist, but the great herald of scientific progress is not Eureka, I have found it. That's funny. That applies to space research. It's when you're researching and find things you don't expect to find. That's when you answer the questions you didn't even know you were supposed to be asking. And the other thing that I would bring up about all of this in general that brings this back into the discussion from us as Democrats. It's not an accident that we have socially progressed, that we have become more and more just and reasonable and free with the greater increase in scientific development. You cannot have an advanced technological society like ours without an educated, free population. It can't happen. The examples I can think of are things that very few of you would probably recognize, but the idea of having an overlord ruling over a bunch of slaves cranking out machinery, it doesn't work. They're not intelligent and educated enough to do it. The more we develop, the more we push the ideas that we as Democrats stand for. So it's definitely something we should be supporting. Do we want to sacrifice food production for it? No. There are other areas we can cut, but so it's an expense we need to be making, and that we need to be supporting as a group. So.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. I'm going to lower your hand, Dan. Okay. And so unless you guys have an objection, let's see if we can make it through the LAIs. All right. So economy and labor, they are currently submitted 2, I think. No, 1.
Bobby, I don't think we got a link to the current LAIs in the email that went out.
If you so I found them on from the email that Rosa sent out. But I'm pretty sure that they're on the website, and I can't remember how they're listed, as something like currently submitted LAIs, something to that effect. There's not a lot of them. Well, some of them do have a lot. I won't lie to you. Right now, I only see 1 for economy and labor, and I will just say to Gary and Michael, it's not very well worded. I don't know who did it, but I mean, we want the Oregon Business Development Department to create an economic equity investment program. It's not, as Michael has explained about, you put the link in that chat, Gary, because I did not, and I don't have the actual link. I'd have to go to my other computer to get it. So, if I'm hoping that, and Michael and Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that the platform, that the PRC will be rewording some of these some of these LAIs, because I think it should say something to the effect of the Oregon Bureau or the Oregon Business Development Department shall create, or should create, or shall is better than should, but I'm assuming, Michael, that you guys are going to reword some of these so that they are actual LAI language. Michael?
Yeah, I would expect that the list of LAIs for each of these articles is going to expand greatly for most of these articles. And for that one in particular, which, as you point out, is badly worded, I expect that's going to be wordsmithed. I would like to point out, for the most part, it's not the platform committee who is writing these LAIs. Our job is really not to write the LAIs. Our job might be to take them and beat them until they make sense. Which there are some in here that started off as planks, and because they were talking about very specific things, we decided to make them an LAI, and so on. There's also older LAIs that we're probably going to want to roll forward from the last platform into this platform, and I can think of at least a couple in particular that are still relevant.
So, Michael, while we're talking about LAIs, is there are we trying to keep, is there a goal limit for LAIs? Like there was a goal limit for planks, or are we just throwing them out there? And
So-
I know a lot of it takes place at the actual platform convention, but I would suspect that frankly, whatever people submit now for LAIs, we will not have any input on until the platform convention, if correct, because unless we do it on the ones that we currently see before us, because the next draft is the final draft pending the platform convention, correct?
So.
I'm seeing Gary nod.
So yeah, a 10,000-foot view, the legislative action items are considered primarily at the platform convention. It's a good idea to get new LAIs in now, so that we have a chance to reword them, and so that the platform convention will have them before they convene, and before they have to rush through all the work of. Sorry, Marty sent me something and I got distracted. I'll read it later, Marty. My apologies. So yeah, you want to get those LAIs in early. We're going to, as a committee, probably take a stab at modifying those, but really that's the work of the platform convention plenary sessions that meet on Saturday, the 19th. So let's talk about our goal. First of all, hard requirement stated in the bylaws. We can't get around it. 50 words an LAI, which means sometimes you've got to do some creative editing in order to get all the ideas into the LAI that you want. The goal for each of the sessions in the 2 plenary sessions is to get down to the top 12 LAIs for that article. So we're going to have 12 coming out of each session. A total of 108. There might be additional ones that we end up considering the following day. But eventually we want to get down to our top 20. So out of all the LAIs, the committees are going to try to get down to 12, or maybe they have to get down to 12. I don't know, because the rules aren't going to be determined until the 29th. And then from there, we have the entire convention come up with a final 20 or so. And those final 20 are the priority legislative action items for the state party. And all the other ones kind of disappear into the ether. So there's a lot of winnowing that goes on here. And if you have an idea that is really good, you're going to want to talk to people ahead of time to make sure that it's stated strongly enough, or that there's a good enough case for it, or maybe that it's combined with enough good items so that it has a chance of passing all those different screens and eventually becoming a priority legislative action item. I was very fortunate last time. I worked with some extraordinary individuals, and I got 2 of my personal priorities into that top 20. But that I'm not counting on that stroke of good fortune again. So now is not just a time to start talking about LAIs. Now is a time to start talking to people about your LAIs and what you want to see in that top 20 legislative action items.
Lobbying, people. There's more than one way that you do that. That's good to know. I do have a further question, since you just talked about the top 20. So are we concentrating on things for Oregon in the top 20, or are we talking concentrating on things at the federal level, or does it not make a difference?
Personally, I don't think it makes a difference. I mean, both the items that I had could apply to well, one item that I had could apply to either state or federal, and I used it to lobby for some state stuff. But the other one was federal. That was the abortion, the Protection for Abortion Rights bill that was before Congress at that time didn't get passed, and we saw the negative results of failing to act on that.
Okay. Sally, what you got for us, Sally?
I received the LAIs that have been submitted so far, but did you not get them? Because I got them from
I got them.
Candy,
I got them.
but I couldn't share that on chat because it said, click here to see.
Right. All I had was a way, I would suppose that you could send the whole email and people could, you know.
So folks, I posted a link to the LAIs in chat at
Okay.
8:22 PM.
Oh, there it is. So if people want to bring that up, you can see what's there. Yes, I will send it to you, but I have to wait until they tell me it's ready, Gary, and then I will. Yes, I'll make a note to myself too. All right. All right. So, there was one under economy and labor that I saw, and it looks like there's one under, I think, under education. So I didn't see anybody. Does anybody? So these literally, you know, send them in. As he said, you need to get them in, and the sooner you get them in, the better. And yes, as somebody who does training on advocacy, you need to start advocating for your LAIs as soon as possible. Anybody you know who's going, anybody you know has a vote, you know, and that's all the more reason for the Malt Dems to get people, because we have 200 and did I hear 70 was the number of possible delegates, and we know we won't get that many there. But the more Malt Dems we have at the platform convention, the easier it is because we will be voting. Right? So if you can convince our group, Washington County, I think should have quite a big group as well. I would advocate with them, you know. Those are things that you want to advocate for your LAIs as soon as possible. Nancy.
Yeah, I looked at the Article 4 on foreign policy, the LAIs. It looks pretty good. It looks like they've incorporated some of the ideas we put forward. So that looks good. I'll look at it more closely, maybe expand as per Michael's suggestion, the part on cluster bombs. I have an ill family member. I am toying with the idea of going to the event where this is finalized. But how late can you expect to register? I would look for housing in Salem anyway, so it's not the housing issue as much.
So I can answer that question real quick. Get your application in to the county party, so the Multnomah Democrats. There's a link to register. And I'll put that in chat after I'm done speaking. Get your request to be added to the roster of Multnomah County delegates to the convention as soon as possible. Your deadline for that is going to be the 19th, because that's when Candy needs that list of delegates from the counties. If you're worried about housing, well, you know where Monmouth is, so if you're looking for housing in Salem, that's fine. But this, just so everybody knows, this time it's a fully in-person convention. The last time it was all over Zoom. This time it's completely in person. So you're going to have to travel to Monmouth. You're going to have to figure out whether to travel back and forth, or whether to stay there. I think they're going to stick pretty strictly to the agenda for the first couple of days. But on that third day, there is, as far as I know, no end time to Sunday. My understanding is that we are going to keep going until the complete platform and the complete roster of priority LAIs, perhaps accepting a final vote that has to go out to everybody until that work is done. So it could go, in the past, it's gone to like 5 o'clock, but it could go to 6 or 7 or 8, and you need to prepare for that. For my part, I'm taking the day after off. That means
Good
I'm
plan.
also not attending Sally's usually very wonderful and lively criminal justice study group meeting, which is scheduled that day. I'm not attending it because I need that day off. And my recommendation to you is to prepare to take that day off if you can, because it's going to be a lot of work.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to quickly go through these because we now have like less than 30 minutes. So I'm going to if you I only saw the one, so economy and labor, certainly there. Education, I only saw one. Environment currently has 7. And I, again, number 1 has really bad wording. We want, no. I see where they're coming from, but, and I think number 5 is a little wordy for me. I didn't count the words, but if that's 50, I'll be surprised. But again, it's a little wordy. Anybody have anything? I don't see any hands on education. Anybody have anything on environment that they want to make sure that gets added? Not seeing any hands. Okay, foreign policy. Nancy already said that she'd seen some of the things that she wanted. I have a question whether we need both 4 and 5 or whether they can be put together, but it may be the word rule again. I don't know, or they may have come from 2 different people. You know, one never knows. Don't see any hands on that one. Healthcare and public health, which has so far, oh, good grief. So far has 18.
Yeah, that sounds right. I expect that we'll have many more.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Now, this is where sometimes people might need some little help, with, there are things that you can put together and put into one, and that doesn't mean that you have to get all those things in one thing. You can still get, divide it for legislation, but Nancy has her hand up. Nancy.
Yeah, Michael or Gary, maybe you know that if this is in the environment one. I've recently heard more about the tank farm problem with the energy hub over in Northwest Portland and the risk of catastrophic act and is that in the environmental? I'm sorry to go back to the earlier one anywhere, or is there need to be something about the critical energy infrastructure? Because that's like the major risk to Portland. If we ever have an earthquake, it'd be horrible.
You asking, Nancy,
so
if
that's
it's
my
in
question.
are you asking if it's in a plank or if it's in an LAI?
I didn't see it in the LAIs. Maybe it's in a plank, or could be added to an LAI if Michael or Gary thought it made sense.
Michael has his hand up.
So I don't recall anything like that either. I think this is a good suggestion for an LAI. I don't know that it's going to make it to the top 20, but I think it's a good suggestion to at least discuss. And I would put it in environment.
Mm-hmm. Could also be put under infrastructure, and you might check to see if there's currently an LAI under infrastructure, because that is part of our critical infrastructure.
So with these LAIs, I would strongly encourage people to put them in one place.
Right. I'm just saying it might be in another place already. That's why I suggested, because I haven't I did not read through all the LAIs. I only got through part of them. Sally,
Can we edit an LAI that's already been submitted, or do we have to submit our own?
you can edit one that's already been submitted.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Does anybody have anything they want to add to healthcare and public health, or any comment that they want to make? Assuming that you have done some speed reading through the 18 LIs that are here. Marty.
Okay, I just did some speed reading as you as you say. First of all, maybe I missed this. I was thinking of something else, but there is in the infrastructure, Article 7, LAI. Sorry, action item. I'm not going to call them LAIs. I hate that term. When I first came on board with this group, I had no idea what an LAI was, and I still don't like it. Anyway, the action items under Article 7 infrastructure, number 1 is about the Willamette River fuel storage facility.
Yep.
So I think that's already covered in here. But yes. So I'm not just a basic scientist. I also happen to be a family physician of 40 years. And so healthcare and public health interests me greatly. Number 9, establish universal basic income nationally. I think that's an excellent thing to do, but it doesn't belong in healthcare and public health. And although it may make people healthier, this is not the place for it. As well as the root causes of poverty, homelessness, houselessness, and hunger. I mean, it's just really pushing the limits on what belongs in healthcare. As I said before, there's too much in here that does not belong. So please think about that.
The first one you said about it's getting late. Sounded to me, do you remember what the first one was you just said that you said didn't belong?
Number 9.
Which was on?
Establish universal basic healthcare, or are we going back to infrastructure?
No, I'm going back to. No, not universal. Weren't you talking about income?
Oh.
Universal basic income. I would suggest that goes under economy.
Yes, I mean, not in healthcare.
Right. So.
And also root causes of poverty, houselessness, and hunger belong perhaps in equity and not in healthcare.
We don't have equity in this, but it might be human rights.
Okay, fine, but I think it's more appropriate there than in healthcare. And I mean, you're getting down.
You're taking notice here, Gary, right?
Gary, you're muted. Well, I mean, as long as this meeting's being recorded and we're taking a transcript, we'll have notes on all this.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Marty?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Oh, ma'am. Today I'm ma'am.
Oh, all right. No, Bobby. Thank you.
Woo-hoo. Look at me. All right, let's move on. Human rights, Article 6, which is fairly long. 18 of those suckers there. And again, I really haven't Sally.
I have a question and then a comment.
All right, question.
What is the word limit on LAIs?
I'm assuming it's 50.
50.
Okay. And in number 12, I just wonder if that would be the place to add, protections for transgender people in prison. because it says discrimination in all areas of life, including employment, housing, healthcare, and education. I mean, would it make sense to say, and in prisons? Is that an area of life?
Are you talking about human rights? Or are you talking about,
Human rights, yes.
Human rights, she's talking about number 12,
Number 12,
the LAI, number 12 LAI.
pass comprehensive transgender rights legislation protecting against discrimination in all areas of life. And then there are examples. Would it be okay to add in prisons?
yeah, I think it would. I just need to check the word limit. Because the 50 words is a hard limit. So there's 34 words in that one. So I think we can add, yeah, we can add 16 words. I would suggest adding 8.
I mean, it's a little funny to call being in prison an area of life. Although there's so many million people incarcerated,
Mhm.
but it could
Yeah.
be an add-on, and education, and then it could say and in prison as sort of separate. Anyway, I think I'll submit that.
All right. Anybody else have anything else for human rights? I love 13, but I don't know how we're going to do it. Marty,
Yeah, go to human rights. Wait, I've got to bring it up again on my screen. Go to human rights number 18, which I think clearly belongs in environment and not in human rights. 18, develop and enforce regulations that blah, 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 well, safeguarding the environment and promoting sustainable, enact and strengthen environmental protection laws, etc. I think it belongs in environment and not in you. I mean, these may be things we are rightfully entitled to, but that particular language, I believe, should go into environment and not be there.
Affordable housing.
I think it's probably, I think it's one of those that could end up almost anywhere because they talk about affordable housing, they talk about accessible healthcare. Those are all human rights according to our laws in the state of Oregon. I think there's elements of everything. I think this is one of those that it's difficult to decide where it goes, but you have stated that, so it will be on the transcript, and we'll see where they decide to, whether they decide to move it.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else under human rights? Okay, infrastructure. Which is, as somebody pointed out, that's where the CEI hub is, you know, basically, without saying CEI hub. I do have a question, somebody can, in number 2, and I mean, I don't know whether Michael or Gary, whether you guys have actually seen these or not, and act statewide restrictions and or ban on short-term rental statewide and created vacancy tax on secondary properties. Are they talking about Airbnbs? Is that what we're talking about? Nancy?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much they're talking about the problem at the coast where other housing gets crowded out by short-term rentals, or whether they're talking about the Airbnb problem with Portland, which is vastly under-regulated and is part of the problem of our rising housing costs and how we have lots of homeless. So yeah, Airbnb needs more enforcement because people aren't following the rules and the city doesn't have enough enforcement dollars. And there are problems at the coast also related to short-term rentals. So I don't know who proposed this change, but at least in terms of Portland, I would support it. because I've heard planning people say it's needed.
Oh, I've been hearing planning people since back before Nick Fish died, when I was on the Senior Advisory Council, which was about 10 years ago now. So yes, it's been an issue that long, at least. Michael.
Okay, so we have not discussed these LAIs
Okay.
in much detail at all yet. That discussion is going to happen July 28th and July 29th. And then, of course, a more detailed discussion will happen at the platform convention. So I have no idea what the motive of this LAI is or who submitted it. But I think it'd be good feedback to say that it's necessary. I think that's good feedback to give us so that we don't accidentally convince ourselves that it isn't. Because, you know, we have a lot of very smart people on the platform committee, but we're not all experts in all things. And then, of course, once it comes time for the platform convention, I think it's going to be a very good idea to argue that this is a necessary LAI. Because again, there are all sorts of interests that are going to show up, and some of them might be Airbnb renters who would love to deep six something like this. So
I have another question on that issue. And maybe you guys can make a note to yourselves too. When we talk about short-term rentals, what are we talking about the length of period of time? Is a short-term rental, 2 days? Is it 5 days? Is it 30 days? Because, if you're on a month-to-month basis, could be considered, depending on leases versus, monthly rentals. I think it probably needs some language or some way to define what we're considering short-term rentals.
That's, and that's something that, we can try to do that in committee, but we have been advised to have a very light touch on these LAIs. So if the LAI is worded like an LAI, if it's in the word limit, we're probably going to just leave it alone.
Okay.
And that's both because we've been advised to have a light touch, and because we're probably going to have hundreds of LAIs to go through and 6 hours to go through them.
Okie dokie. Okay, so that was infrastructure. Anybody have anything on Article 8, which has so far 2 LAIs? I don't think any of us are going to complain about either of those 2. And Article 9, there are currently, I see 2. Michael.
We can expect 2 more LAIs in Article 2. One of them is going
Article 2?
Sorry, Article 9, my apologies.
Okay.
We can expect 2 more. One of them is going to discuss regulation of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. And we're kind of smushing those together because we feel that one, it has an easier time of passing that way, and 2, these are kind of related topics in the way that they're overhyped. I'll just go and say they're overhyped right now. There's too many people torpedoing money at these concepts, not enough people who actually understand them, and there's an awful lot of waste being generated because people aren't practicing these ethically. The other one is going to be an LAI on sustained investment in open source software and open source technology. And that's pursuant to one of the planks that's there. And that's something that I'm working on with a bunch of people in the open source community here in Oregon. And I don't know if you all are aware, but Oregon is sort of the open source capital of the world. We've got the Linux kernel development team here. We have huge corporate investments in other open source projects here. Probably the only thing that we don't see a lot of open source development going on in Oregon would be BSD, Berkeley Standard Distribution Operating Systems, and the technologies that are dependent on those, just because those teams evolved elsewhere. But this is an important thing, not only for the country, but for the state of Oregon.
doesn't Linus still live here?
Linus lives in Multnomah County. He is a Multnomah County voter. He is
Yeah,
not a Democrat.
He's originally Norwegian, I think, but yeah, I remember him moving to Portland. So yeah, the guy who originally created Linux, yeah, he's a Portlander now.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands. I hope this has been useful for people to at least be able to discuss and get some of your ideas out there. And I'm hoping that I will see all of you. Some of you I'll see at the PRLC meeting next a week from today, by the way. I hope I'll see all of you at the convention. And yes, Faith, you've been quiet this whole time.
It's been a very interesting discussion. I'm trying to register for the convention. Mike, did you put that into the chat room? The link?
I have not yet put that in the chat room. I'll do that in just a bit.
Okay.
So just so people know, first of all, you have to register with the party and they have to send that on to DPO. And then you will get a link for you to actually register and pay your money to DPO so that you can go to the platform convention.
So
Just
but
letting you know. And there's also a link for you if I don't know if it's still available. For you to, if you want housing, you could stay in the dorms for $30 a night.
Okay.
Just
Well,
so
I'll talk
you,
about that later. I just realized that the registration deadline is tomorrow.
no, it's the 19th, isn't it?
Oh, the 19th.
It's the day
Today-
after
okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, but it's close. Okay,
Yes.
that's
That's
all
right.
I wanted. Sounds good. You guys were all good.
I
Good
do want to
meeting.
thank you and I hope this was helpful. We probably won't do this again before the DPO platform because we'll probably just meet there and I'm hoping we can do something. I'm not, is anyone driving to the convention on Friday and returning Saturday? I'm driving there on Friday and returning Friday and I'm driving there on Saturday and returning Saturday and I'm driving there Sunday and returning Sunday. I'm thinking. So I don't know if anybody, because the convention will not be over on Sunday. Actually, the first day of the convention is Saturday, not Friday. Friday, I haven't looked at, I forgot to look at the agenda, but we have, I believe caucus meetings on Friday. Michael, Gary, have you looked at the agenda for the SEC?
We do not have caucus meetings. We actually have a session to approve the rules of the convention
On Friday,
on Friday. There
okay.
are no caucus meetings. There are no standing committee meetings.
All righty. And what time did we start on Friday?
Oh, too early?
All right. Faith, did you have anything more?
No, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay, thank you again very much. And I look forward to seeing all of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Night,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.